In the corner of a city where progress seemed to have forgotten its way, sat an aging house that had seen better days. The paint on its wooden boards peeled away like old memories, and the garden out front had been reduced to patches of stubborn weeds. It wasn't much, but it was home to Anna Dawson, a widow in her mid-50s. Anna's life had been defined by quiet sacrifices. Once upon a time, she and her husband, William, had dreamed of a life filled with warmth and stability. He worked tirelessly at the local factory, and she sewed clothing and curtains for neighbors to supplement their income. But tragedy struck when William succumbed to a sudden heart attack, leaving Anna alone with debts and no safety net. Now, years later, Anna spent her days mending clothes for the neighborhood and baking small treats to sell at the corner market. Her hands were calloused, her back bent from years of toil, but her spirit remained unbroken. Her most cherished possession was a simple silver locket, a gift from William on their first wedding anniversary. Inside was a tiny picture of the two of them, young and full of dreams. On the back were engraved the words, "All my love, forever." It was her anchor in an otherwise turbulent life. One icy evening, as Anna prepared to stretch a can of soup into dinner for the next 2 nights, a knock echoed through her quiet home. She hesitated, her heart fluttering. Visitors were rare these days, especially after dark. Opening the door, she was greeted by the sight of a man who looked as though he had been carved from the very cold itself. He stood there, shivering in a threadbare coat, his face gaunt and shadowed. His eyes, however, were what caught her attention. They were heavy with pain, but flickered with a desperate hope. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I haven't eaten in days. If you could spare even a little food, I'd be grateful." Anna's first instinct was to close the door. She had so little to give, but as she looked at him, she remembered William's words. "Kindness costs nothing, Anna." "Come inside," she said softly, stepping aside. The man introduced himself as Jack, a former construction worker who had fallen on hard times after an accident. He explained how medical bills had drained his savings and left him homeless. "I used to have everything," he said, staring at his trembling hands. "Now, I don't even have shoes that don't leak." Anna poured the last of her soup into 2 bowls, offering him the larger portion. As they ate, Jack's story unfolded like a tapestry of loss. Once strong and independent, he had been reduced to begging for scraps, a humiliation he wore like a second skin. When Jack finished his meal, he looked at Anna with tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. People don't even look at me anymore, let alone offer help." Anna simply smiled. "You don't owe me anything, Jack. Sometimes all we have to give is kindness." That night, Jack slept on Anna's worn-out couch, wrapped in a threadbare quilt she had mended too many times to count. As she watched him drift off, her gaze settled on the small kitchen drawer where her last penny lay. The next morning, she handed the coin to Jack. "Here," she said, pressing it into his palm. "It's not much, but it's all I have left. Use it to get yourself something warm or a bus ride to somewhere safe." Jack stared at the penny, his hand trembling. "You're giving me your last penny?" Anna nodded, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. "It's just money. What matters is that you keep going. Promise me you won't give up." Jack's eyes filled with tears as he clutched the coin. "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Weeks passed, and Anna's life grew harder. The weather turned cruel, and the little work she relied on began to dry up. She sold her locket, her most treasured possession, for a few dollars to buy firewood and keep the cold at bay. One evening, as she sat alone in her dimly lit house, she felt a wave of despair wash over her. She thought of Jack and wondered if her act of kindness had truly made a difference. Had she been foolish to give away her last penny? Her doubts were interrupted by a loud knock at the door. When she opened it, she was stunned to see Jack standing there. But he wasn't the same man who had left weeks ago. Jack was dressed in clean, warm clothes, his face filled with life and gratitude. Behind him stood several people carrying boxes. "Anna," Jack began, his voice trembling, "I promised I'd repay your kindness, and now I can." The boxes contained food, firewood, warm clothes, and even an envelope filled with enough money to cover her overdue bills. Jack explained how her penny had been a turning point for him. It had bought him a bus ticket to a neighboring town, where he found work with a charity that helped people get back on their feet. "I told them about you," Jack said, his eyes glistening. "About how you gave me your last penny when you had nothing to spare. They wanted to help the woman who saved me." Anna wept as the weight of her struggles began to lift. For the first time in years, she felt hope. Anna's life changed that winter. With Jack's help, she found new opportunities to support herself, and her community rallied around her. Inspired by her story, a local charity launched a program called the Last Penny Fund, aimed at helping people in desperate situations. As for Jack, he became a regular visitor, sharing meals with Anna and helping her around the house. Together, they began volunteering, spreading kindness to others in need. Anna's simple act of generosity had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even the smallest gestures could create ripples of change. Anna's story reminds us that no act of kindness is ever wasted. Even when we feel we have nothing left to give, our compassion can become someone else's lifeline. In a world that often overlooks the vulnerable, the last penny is a powerful reminder to see, to care, and to act, because sometimes the smallest coin can hold the greatest value.